Ladies and gentlemen, the inventor of strawberry cough, Kyle Kushman. Mr. Kushman, how are you, sir?
Absolutely. I'm fantastic. How are you tonight?
We're doing incredible. Thank you so much for being on the show and for helping us add credibility to medical marijuana and to add some expertise, so to speak. So before we get started, for those of you who aren't familiar, I want to establish some of your credentials. Can you tell us about some of the strains you've actually invented and what you do at Oaksterdam?
Well, it's interesting you should bring up strains that I've invented because the strawberry cough it's really interesting. A lot of people try to get credit for things they do. I'm really lucky in some respects. I don't know why. I get more credit than I deserve, I feel. I didn't invent the strawberry cough. And I understand why people think that I did. I drove cross-country with a trunk full of clones, and I gave them out in every city along the way. And so I gave out over 100 clones, so 100 people shared it with other people, and they said, "Where did you get it?" And I said, "Kyle Kushman." And the other thing is Jason King, who wrote the Canna Bible, who interviewed me for the strain. I told him this story, but he chose to print it otherwise. So the world thinks that Kyle made strawberry cough, but he didn't.
That's an amazing story. That's incredible. That's really wild, actually.
It was really created by a novice breeder. It was a first-time accidental cross by a young kid named Toby, who's no longer with us, in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And he shared it with me, and I shared it with the world.
That's incredible. Well, we know that you're not really into the fight world or into mixed martial arts, but there is some stuff that is crossing over into your world involving medical marijuana. There's a prize fighter named Nick Diaz from California. He was suspended just now.
I know him very well.
Really? Can you tell us about how you know him? Because this is the
well, I don't know him personally.
Well, I mean, can you tell us?
I am a fan of MMA, actually.
Oh, really?
Oh, excellent.
Okay, well, tell us. Nick Diaz is like one of the coolest guys ever, and he's known for the medical marijuana movement. What do you think of him, and what do you think about the 5-year suspension?
He just got a 5-year suspension.
Yeah, he cannot work for 5 years he cannot fight for 5 years and has to pay a $165,000 fine. There's a White House petition going on. There's court cases. They're going to take this to the Supreme Court. I mean, how can you take away the man's right to earn a living?
What? I absolutely agree, 100%. You can't argue with the ridiculousness of it. But I'll tell you, I had a man on my show, my podcast, a couple of weeks ago, The Grow Show on Cannabis Radio, and his name is Dan Vietz, and he represented a man named Jeff Mizanski. And Jeff Mizanski had just gotten out of jail the day before for serving over 20 years in jail for distributing what was 6 pounds of marijuana. It was his third offense, of course, and he got sentenced to life in jail.
Oh, wow.
So life in jail, 5 years without work, they're all very insane.
Yeah.
I'm a guy who always tries to look on the bright side of something, I mean, things are getting better. They're much better than they were. I can now travel around the country to most places with my personal medication. I can travel in the car with it from place to place and not feel like if the lights go on, my day is going to end. It's not fair. It's not fair. Marijuana is not typically known as a performance-enhancing drug, if you will. It's more known as a make-you-sit on the couch. It relaxes people. It relieves anxiety. But it's not a performance-enhancing drug, and I don't know why, coaches and teams around the country would rather have their players using marijuana than alcohol.
Yeah, so, okay, before I ask you about the PED thing, so you think in terms of recovery, would you think that marijuana is better for recovery than alcohol? And you think there's benefits, for inflammation and for pain that could help someone who's training full-time?
Well, of course, and all of the above. In any case, marijuana, cannabis, is going to be better than alcohol. Alcohol is not medicine. alcohol it really is not just not medicine, and cannabis is medicine, and it performs all of those functions of inflammation and helps with recovery time, helps lower your stress level, helps improve blood flow. So it's just
that's pretty incredible.
It's fairly benign. It's fairly benign when you really compare it to other drugs. It's certainly doesn't fall into the category of a performance enhancing drug.
Okay, well,
I mean, and they don't disallow. I mean, if you have alcohol in your blood when you perform, they don't disqualify you. And I've seen people do some crazy things on alcohol, right? And all of a sudden, or caffeine. You're not necessarily going to be working out and using caffeine, but I've seen people do some pretty short-term amazing things on a couple of Red Bulls, but they won't throw you out for that.
Right.
Yeah, and then also Joe Warren, another fighter, he just got suspended. He had 53 nanogram in his blood, and the limit is 50 nanogram. So, is it possible? How the hell can they test? Is it possible when you're competing in a cage fight that if you took a test right after that it possibly would be extracted like through your urine because you just were competing at such a high level of where you're sweating and just working out right then before the test? Could that alter or affect? And what I'm trying to say is it possible he could have either smoked right before the fight or a month before the fight and still failed that test?
I don't think that they have the ability to adequately discern the answer to that. And, this nanogram thing, I mean, you can probably be in a room and absorb without even having used it. You could be at a party and inhaling secondhand smoke and probably have gotten that much in your system if it had been the night before.
So that excuse, I can use that and it will work. You can say like, oh, someone blew it in my face.
You're fucked.
Well,
they're like 200
nanograms. And I'll vouch for you.
Okay. All right, hell yeah. All right, my co-host, Mr. King, Jonathan Clinch, King wants to ask you a question, sir.
Yeah, you touched on it earlier. You said that you're able to drive state to state now with your medicine. I'm also a medicinal patient. We have an election coming up. How far away are we from going back to the old ways of the archaic laws where if you got pulled over, it did ruin your day? Are we still one election away from that actually happening again?
Oh, man, I really hope not. I really think that the decriminalization of marijuana is a bipartisan issue, and the reason is money. Money. Everybody wants to get in on the money train. And truth is that very few people are really, truly afraid of marijuana anymore. Whether you want to use it or not, nobody's had an experience with a marijuana junkie that they have a story to tell, or, a nightmare. I know that there are a few people out there who say that they end up in a treatment center for marijuana, but, people end up in treatment centers that don't use drugs.
Right.
But people have problems.
For video games. Yeah, for shopping, gambling, video games.
Masturbating.
So,
true.
I like to think
it is true.
I like to think that we'll never go back. You can't stuff the genie back in the bottle, because you remember when legalization happened in Colorado and Washington about the lines around the door, right. And they sold out in the whole state. They sold out in like the first 3 days. You can't tell. You can't say you can't do something that's so prevalent, that's just so common, because it was going on before they made it legal anyways. All they're doing, people say this all the time, why would I create a new industry that's going to peddle drugs to our society? You're not creating a new industry. This industry has existed for a half a century. And the suppliers, the growers, the mules, the brokers, the dealers, they're all there. You just want to bring from the dark into the light, tax it so the money goes to good instead of wherever, and fix our broken system and stop putting people in jail for nonviolent offenses, right?
Yeah, we have a couple more questions for you before we let you get going. So, how you said earlier, people, the story of you inventing strawberry cough is a case of people giving you too much credit. we might be giving you too much credit again for this, but I was going to try to argue the point that your marijuana actually could be a performance-enhancing drug because it helps people focus. It helps some people relax. It helps them get in the zone. It helps muscle inflammation. I think your weed is so good that it is a performance-enhancing drug. So how is it not?
What? You know what? You caught me in a lie.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. I wanted to ask you about the veganic system that you have because I'm really into clean medication. That's one of the things that I'm a stickler about. And I was hoping maybe you could talk about that, your system and your clean medication.
Well, really, I never really wanted to sell anything until I found veganics. I was happy being a teacher and an educator and a lecturer, and then I had the healthiest cycle I'd ever had in over 15 years of growing. And then I just so happened to run into an organic chemist who said that he could help me with this. And I just wanted to bring it to the world. So I created Vegan Matrix. And, it's better than organic in a few ways. One is it's much more consistent. I've taken all the guesswork out of it. I've formulated it so you just feed with every watering, you follow the feed chart. There's no guesswork. Organics, you never know when the power is going to kick in because you're waiting for decomposition. The other thing is organics is great, man. I live organic. I've been growing organically for over 20 years. But as the earth gets dirtier, the shit coming out of the back end of the animals isn't as clean as it used to be. It's loaded with antibiotics and hormones and pesticides. And we just keep turning this stuff back into the system, turning it back into food for the animals. And that's where we get our aggregate toxicity that increases all of our cancer rates and everything else. So I like to say that veganic horticulture is the evolution of organic horticulture. It's the next step in organic horticulture.
Okay, and then last question for you. I've got to ask you, Mr. Kushman, what strain are you medicating on tonight?
Well, right before you called, I loaded up a bowl of my brand new cherry cough.
All right. And is that something that you did invent or create?
I did. Yes, I did.
Oh, there you go.
All right. Genetic proprietary strain. It's an offshoot of the Cherry Lopez, which is also very rare and very favored out here in SoCal.
What?
And
yeah, we're in Orange County, LA area as well. So my co-host might have to visit. Is it Angels? What was the name of the clinic?
No, well, the only place that you can get Kushman Organics right now is through speedweed.com, and you have to be in the LA County.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
yeah, my co-host lives in Venice.
Check and check.
I will be calling you
very
soon.
Please check out speedweed.com and also check out KyleKushman.com. There's a lot of really cool shit there, a free growers forum. You can find out all about organic farming and post your own pictures, start your own threads. It's all free.
Oh, wow. All right, well, Mr. Kushman, we really appreciate your time. You're a guest we've really wanted to have on for your expertise. We've been talking for a few weeks now, and we really appreciate your time, and thank you so much. Everyone, please do yourself a favor. Visit KyleKushman.com. Mr. Kushman, thank you for your time and for your expertise. Woohoo!
Thank you, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.